What if I told you? The smartest man who ever lived never wrote a single word. Not one book, not one letter, not one sentence. He left nothing behind. No writings, no records, no proof that he even existed, except through the words of others. And yet today, 2,400 years later, every university on Earth still teaches his method. Every courtroom in the world uses his logic. Every time a teacher asks a student a question instead of giving an answer, that is his influence. His name was Socrates, and the most disturbing part of his story is not how he lived, it is how he died. Athens, the so-called birthplace of democracy, took the wisest man who ever walked its streets, gave him a trial, found him guilty, and forced him to drink poison, not because he committed a crime, but because he asked too many questions. And the people in power could not handle the answers. This is the story of Socrates, and once you hear it, you will never look at the world the same way again. Around 470 BC, a boy was born in Athens, Greece. His father was a stonemason. His mother was a midwife. They were not rich. They were not powerful. They were ordinary working people living in one of the most extraordinary cities in the ancient world. Nobody looked at this boy and saw greatness. Nobody predicted that this child from a simple family would one day become the most famous thinker in all of human history. His name was Socrates. And his story begins not with books or schools or teachers. It begins with a question that would define his entire life and eventually cost him everything. As a young man, Socrates fought as a soldier in the Athenian army. He was known for his extraordinary physical courage. In battle, he never ran, never panicked. While other soldiers fled in chaos, Socrates walked calmly through the most dangerous situations as if he felt no fear at all. His fellow soldiers were stunned by him, not just because of his bravery, but because of something else entirely. Even in the middle of war, Socrates would stop, stand completely still, and think for hours, sometimes an entire day, just standing there, lost in thought, while the world moved around him. This was not madness. This was the beginning of a mind unlike any other, a mind that could not stop asking why. When he returned from war, Socrates did something unusual. He walked into the streets of Athens and started talking to people. Not just talking, questioning. He approached politicians, poets, craftsmen, generals, businessmen, anyone who claimed to have knowledge or wisdom, and he would ask them simple questions. What is courage? What is justice? What is beauty? What is the right way to live? These people were confident at first. Of course, they knew the answers. They were experts. They were respected. They were powerful. But within minutes of talking to Socrates, something strange happened. Their answers started falling apart. Every definition they gave Socrates would calmly question. Every assumption they made he would gently challenge. And slowly these powerful, confident people would realize something deeply uncomfortable. They actually had no idea what they were talking about. Socrates called this his gift to Athens. He believed that exposing ignorance was the greatest service one human being could offer another, but not everyone saw it that way. Word spread quickly through Athens. People started gathering to watch Socrates work. Young men especially were fascinated. They followed him through the streets. They watched him dismantle the arguments of the most powerful people in the city. One by one, day after day. And they loved it. Among these young followers was a brilliant student named Plato, who would one day write down everything Socrates said and preserve it for the next 2,400 years. But while the young admired Socrates, the powerful despised him, because there is nothing more dangerous to a person in power than someone who makes them look foolish in public. And Socrates did it every single day. Without apology, without hesitation, without stopping. There is one story about Socrates that explains everything about who he was. A friend of his went to the oracle at Delphi, the most sacred place in ancient Greece, where it was believed the gods spoke directly to humans. His friend asked the oracle one question: "Is there anyone wiser than Socrates?" The oracle answered, "No, there is no one wiser." When Socrates heard this, he was genuinely confused. He did not believe he was wise. So he went on a mission to prove the oracle wrong. He approached the wisest men in Athens one by one, tested their knowledge, questioned their beliefs, and discovered something extraordinary. Every single person who claimed to be wise was not actually wise. They only thought they were. And that was the difference. Socrates knew that he knew nothing. And according to him, that awareness, that honest acknowledgement of ignorance, was the only real wisdom that existed. This idea became the foundation of Western philosophy. Know that you do not know. And never stop asking why. By the time Socrates was in his 60s, the tension in Athens had reached a breaking point. The city had just lost a devastating war against Sparta. The mood was dark. The people were angry. They needed someone to blame. And the powerful men who had been humiliated by Socrates for decades saw their opportunity. In 399 BC, Socrates was put on trial. The charges were simple: corrupting the youth of Athens and failing to acknowledge the gods of the city. But everyone in Athens knew the real reason. He had spent his entire life exposing the ignorance of powerful people. And they wanted him gone. The trial was held before a jury of 500 Athenian citizens. Socrates was given the chance to defend himself, and what he did in that courtroom was the most remarkable thing he had ever done. He refused to beg. He refused to flatter the jury. He refused to pretend to be something he was not. Instead, he stood before 500 people and told them the truth, that he had done nothing wrong. That questioning was not a crime. That wisdom begins with honest doubt, and that if they killed him, they would only harm themselves, because they would be destroying the one voice in Athens that was trying to wake them up. The jury found him guilty by a narrow margin. Then came the question of punishment. Socrates could have suggested exile. He could have proposed a fine. He could have said anything that would save his life. But instead, he suggested that Athens should reward him for his service to the city. The jury was furious. They voted for death. And so on a spring day in 399 BC, the man who had never written a single word, who had owned nothing, who had asked for nothing except the freedom to think and question, drank a cup of hemlock poison surrounded by his closest friends and students. He died calmly, without fear, without regret, talking to the very end. His last words, according to Plato, were simple. He turned to a friend and said, "We owe a rooster to the god of medicine. Make sure that debt is paid." Even in his final moments, Socrates was thinking of his obligations, his honesty, his integrity, right up until the last breath. After his death, something happened that nobody expected. His ideas did not disappear. They exploded. Plato wrote down everything, every conversation, every argument, every question. And through Plato, the voice of Socrates reached every corner of the ancient world. Then, through Aristotle, it reached further still. Today, the Socratic Method, his way of teaching through questions rather than answers, is used in law schools, medical schools, and universities across the entire planet. Every time a great teacher asks a student, "What do you think?" instead of "Here is the answer," that is Socrates. Every time a courtroom lawyer exposes a contradiction through careful questioning, that is Socrates. Every time a scientist refuses to accept an assumption without evidence, that is Socrates. A man who owned nothing, wrote nothing, and died with nothing. Changed the way the entire human race thinks. The lesson that philosophy of successful people wants to leave with you today is this: Socrates was not killed because he was wrong. He was killed because he was right, and the people around him were not ready to hear it. The most dangerous thing you can do in a world built on comfortable lies is to ask honest questions. People will call you difficult, arrogant, troublesome. They will tell you to be quiet, to stop questioning, to just accept things as they are. But if Socrates had listened to those people, if he had stayed silent, if he had stopped asking why, the entire foundation of Western thought would never have been built. So the next time someone tells you that your questions are too much, that you think too deeply, that you should just accept the way things are, remember Socrates. Remember that he died for the right to ask why. And ask yourself, am I willing to keep asking the questions that make people uncomfortable? Because that is exactly where the truth lives. If this story moved something inside you, subscribe to Philosophy of Successful People. Because here every single week we go deep inside the lives of the greatest minds who ever lived. Not just to learn history, but to find the wisdom that changes how you think today. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join thousands of deep thinkers who refuse to stop asking why. See you in the next story.